A police officer tried to arrest an innocent fan. Lennon did it, and the entire street stopped. New York City, 1973, the Lower East Side, a labyrinth of fire escapes, graffiti-scarred brick, and the ceaseless hum of a city that never truly slept. The air was thick with the scent of street food, exhaust, and the underlying tension of a city grappling with crime and social unrest. John Lennon, in the midst of his lost weekend, walked with a restless energy, Yoko Ono a distant memory, May Pang his constant companion. He was seeking inspiration, or perhaps just distraction, from the turmoil of his personal life and the relentless pressure of his ongoing deportation battle. He was no longer the mop-topped Beatle, but a grizzled rock icon, his face etched with experience, his eyes still holding that defiant spark. He loved New York and its raw energy, its melting pot of cultures, its endless possibilities. But he also knew its harsh realities. They had just left a small independent art gallery, a haven for avant-garde expression, a world away from the corporate sheen of mainstream music. As they emerged onto the bustling sidewalk, the cacophony of the street enveloped them. A young man, no older than 20, stood near a lamppost, clutching a worn copy of Imagine. His name was Miguel, a recent immigrant from Puerto Rico, his eyes wide with the wonder and fear of a new city. He was a fan, a quiet admirer, drawn to John's message of peace and hope. Miguel had spotted John leaving the gallery, a moment of pure, unadulterated awe. He hadn't approached, hadn't screamed. He had simply stood there, holding his album, a silent testament to the impact John's music had on his life. But then, a patrol car screeched to a halt nearby. Two officers emerged, their faces grim, their presence immediately casting a pall over the vibrant street. One, Officer Miller, a burly man with a hardened gaze, seemed particularly agitated. Miller's eyes swept the crowd, landing on Miguel. Perhaps it was his ethnicity, his slightly disheveled appearance, or simply the officer's own prejudice. Whatever the reason, Miller's gaze hardened. "Hey, you," Miller barked, pointing at Miguel. "What are you doing loitering here? Got any ID?" Miguel, startled, fumbled for his wallet, his hands trembling. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was just standing there, dreaming. But Miller wasn't interested in explanations. He saw a target, a potential troublemaker. He moved towards Miguel, on his hand already on his nightstick, his voice growing louder, more aggressive. "You deaf kid? I asked for ID. Or are you looking for trouble?" The scene escalated quickly. Miguel, intimidated and confused, struggled to produce his documents. The officer, misinterpreting his fumbling as resistance, grabbed Miguel's arm, twisting it roughly behind his back. "That's it, punk. You're coming with me." The street, usually a river of constant motion, began to slow. People stopped, their conversations dying. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. An innocent fan was being unjustly arrested. John Lennon, from a few feet away, had witnessed the entire exchange. The casual racism, the abuse of power, the fear in Miguel's eyes. He felt a familiar cold fury rise within him. What happened next would last mere seconds. But those seconds would reveal the unwavering integrity of a rock and roll icon, the raw power of a single voice against injustice, and the profound impact of standing up for what is right. A police officer was trying to arrest an innocent fan, and John Lennon was about to do something that would make the entire street stop. John Lennon's journey to becoming an outspoken advocate for civil rights and social justice was deeply rooted in his working-class Liverpool upbringing and his innate sense of fairness. He had always questioned authority, challenged norms, and championed the underdog. His move to New York City in 1971 had intensified his activism. He immersed himself in the city's diverse communities, witnessing firsthand the struggles of immigrants, the systemic inequalities, and the pervasive racism that simmered beneath the surface of American society. He understood that the dream of Imagine was a constant battle, fought on the streets, in the courts, and in the hearts of men. By 1973, during his Lost Weekend, John was grappling with personal demons, but his core values remained intact. He was still the man who believed in equality, in using his voice to speak truth to power. He had faced down the U.S. government's attempts to deport him, understanding the machinery of injustice from personal experience. Miguel, the young Puerto Rican immigrant, represented the very people John often sang about: the marginalized, the voiceless, those who were often targeted by systems of power. Miguel had come to America seeking a better life, carrying his dreams and his love for music. He was a symbol of hope, but also of vulnerability in a city that could be both welcoming and brutal. Officer Miller, the arresting officer, was a product of a system that often fostered prejudice and aggressive tactics, particularly in high-crime areas. He saw a young, non-white man seemingly loitering and immediately jumped to conclusions. His actions were fueled by a combination of ingrained bias, the pressure of his job, and a casual disregard for individual rights. He likely had no idea that one of the most famous men in the world was witnessing his abuse of power. The atmosphere on the Lower East Side Street was now charged. The unspoken question hung heavy. Would anyone challenge Officer Miller? Or would the moment pass, leaving Miguel to be swept away by the system, another statistic in the city's endless churn? John had used his name, his platform, to fight for peace, for civil rights, for his own right to remain in America. To let this injustice unfold before his eyes, to allow an innocent young man to be brutalized by an overzealous officer, would be a betrayal of everything he believed in. He couldn't let it stand. He couldn't let that kind of casual oppression go unchallenged. Not in his presence, not when he had a voice that could cut through the noise of the street and demand attention. The moment Officer Miller twisted Miguel's arm, a collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. But before anyone could react, before the street could erupt in shouts or protests, John Lennon moved. He didn't charge. He didn't yell. He simply stepped forward, his presence suddenly commanding, cutting through the chaos like a laser. He walked directly towards Officer Miller, his eyes, usually full of sardonic wit, now burning with an intense, unwavering focus. "Officer!" John's voice, though not a shout, carried an authority that instantly cut through the street noise. It was the voice of a man accustomed to being heard, a voice that had resonated in stadiums and challenged governments. Officer Miller, caught off guard, paused his rough handling of Miguel. He turned, his face contorted in annoyance, ready to dismiss whoever dared to interrupt him. But then he saw John Lennon. The recognition was instant, a flicker of surprise, then irritation crossing his face. "Who the hell are you?" Miller barked, trying to regain control, but his voice lacked its previous conviction. John ignored the question. His gaze was fixed on Miguel, then back to Miller's hand, gripping the young man's arm. "Let him go," John said, his voice low, steady, but imbued with an undeniable force. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Miller scoffed, trying to project an air of authority. "Stay out of this, Mr. Lennon. This is police business." He was loitering, resisting arrest. Loitering? John's voice held a dangerous edge. He was standing on a public sidewalk, holding a record album. My record album, as it happens, and he wasn't resisting. He was scared. "You're intimidating him." The crowd, which had been holding its breath, now began to murmur. People started pulling out cameras, recognizing the gravity of the situation. The presence of John Lennon, the global icon, confronting a police officer on a New York street was an explosive, undeniable event. Miller's face flushed with anger. He was losing control of the situation, and he knew it. He tightened his grip on Miguel, trying to assert his dominance. "I said stay out of this, or I'll arrest you for obstruction." John took another step closer, his eyes never leaving Miller's. "You want to arrest me, officer? Go ahead. But you'll have to explain to the entire city why you're arresting John Lennon for defending an innocent kid you're harassing." He then did something unexpected. He reached into his own pocket, pulled out his wallet, and calmly extracted his green card. He held it up, not defiantly, but with a quiet, unyielding confidence. "I'm a legal resident here, officer. I know my rights, and I know his rights. Now, let him go." The second officer, who had been standing by, now stepped forward, a look of concern on his face. He recognized the potential disaster unfolding. Arresting John Lennon, especially for defending a young, innocent fan, would be a public relations nightmare of epic proportions. Miller hesitated, his eyes darting between John's unwavering gaze, the growing crowd, and the flashing cameras. He was trapped, his authority challenged, his prejudice exposed. The entire street had stopped. Every eye was on John Lennon, and in that moment, the silent roar of his conviction was louder than any scream. The standoff hung heavy in the air, a tableau of power and defiance. Officer Miller, his face a mask of frustration and barely contained rage, still held Miguel's arm. But his grip had loosened, his resolve visibly wavering under the intense scrutiny. John Lennon stood firm, his posture radiating a quiet strength. He wasn't just a rock star anymore. He was a witness, a protector, a voice for the voiceless. He knew the power of his presence, the weight his name carried, and he was wielding it with deliberate precision. The crowd, now a solid mass of onlookers, was no longer just curious. They were engaged. They had seen the injustice, and they were silently but powerfully siding with John. Cell phones weren't a thing, but word was spreading like wildfire. People were whispering, pointing, and a few brave souls were openly voicing their disapproval of the officer's actions. The second officer, whose name was Jenkins, finally intervened. He stepped between Miller and John, his voice calm but firm. "Officer Miller, let's de-escalate this. We have witnesses. Mr. Lennon is a public figure. This isn't worth it." Miller shot Jenkins a venomous look, but the logic was undeniable. The optics were terrible. The potential fallout immense. He knew he was beaten. With a final, disgusted grunt, Miller released Miguel's arm, shoving him slightly. Miguel stumbled, rubbing his wrist, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He looked at John Lennon, a silent plea for understanding, for protection. John didn't move. He simply maintained eye contact with Miller, a silent challenge, a clear message that this act of injustice would not be forgotten. "You're lucky, kid," Miller snarled at Miguel, his voice still laced with venom. "Next time, keep moving." "Next time," John interjected, his voice cutting through Miller's, "you'll find yourself facing a formal complaint, officer, and I'll be the one filing it." The threat was clear. John Lennon, with his resources and his platform, was not someone to be trifled with. Miller knew it. His face paled slightly, and the tension began to dissipate, replaced by a collective sigh of relief from the crowd. Miguel, still shaken, slowly backed away from the officers, his gaze never leaving John. John then turned to Miguel, his expression softening. He offered a small, reassuring smile. "You all right, son?" Miguel, still speechless, managed a shaky nod. He clutched his Imagine album tighter, as if it were a shield. The officers, defeated, retreated to their patrol car, the engine idling loudly, a symbol of their hasty retreat. The street, which had been frozen in a moment of crisis, slowly began to stir back to life. But it was a different kind of life, a life infused with the memory of what had just transpired. John Lennon had not just stopped an arrest, he had stopped an entire street. He had used his fame, not for personal gain, but for justice. And in doing so, he had shown everyone present the true power of standing up for the vulnerable. As the patrol car sped away, leaving a faint scent of burning rubber, the street erupted, not in anger, but in a wave of applause and cheers directed at John Lennon. People rushed forward, not for autographs, but to thank him, to shake his hand, to express their admiration. Miguel, still trembling, found himself enveloped in the crowd's gratitude. He looked at John, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and profound relief. John, uncomfortable with the sudden adulation, gently deflected the praise. He turned his attention back to Miguel, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You really all right?" John asked again, his concern genuine. Miguel finally found his voice, though it was still shaky. "Yes, Mr. Lennon, thank you. I thank you so much. I didn't do anything." "I know," John said, his voice gentle. "I saw. That officer was out of line." Mei Pang, who had been a silent, anxious observer throughout the ordeal, now stepped forward, offering Miguel a kind smile. "Are you hurt?" "No, ma'am, just scared." Miguel looked down at his Imagine album, then back at John. "I just wanted to see you. I love your music. It helps me." John's expression softened further. He understood. He knew the power of music, the solace it could offer in a harsh world. He saw in Miguel a reflection of his own younger self, a dreamer in a city that could be unforgiving. "What's your name, son?" John asked. "Miguel. Miguel Ramirez." "Miguel," John repeated, a thoughtful look on his face. "You got a good spirit, Miguel. I don't let anyone take that from you." He then did something that surprised everyone, including Mei Pang. He took a pen from his pocket, opened Miguel's Imagine album, and signed it with a flourish. To Miguel, he wrote, "Keep imagining. John Lennon." He handed the album back to Miguel, whose eyes welled up with tears. It was more than an autograph. It was a blessing, a validation, a symbol of hope. John then turned to the growing crowd. "All right, everyone, let's get back to our day. No more trouble here." His voice, though still firm, was now laced with a hint of his characteristic charm, gently dispersing the onlookers. As the crowd slowly began to disperse, John, May, and Miguel walked away from the scene, leaving behind a street that had witnessed a moment of raw, unscripted justice. Miguel, walking beside his unexpected hero, and felt a profound shift within him. The fear was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful sense of gratitude and an unshakable belief in the good that could emerge from the darkest corners. John Lennon, the rebel, the activist, had not just stopped an arrest. He had offered a lifeline. He had shown that even in the concrete jungle, compassion and courage could prevail. And in doing so, he had transformed a moment of injustice into a powerful testament to human dignity. The incident on the Lower East Side, though not widely reported in the mainstream press, spread like wildfire through New York's immigrant communities and among John Lennon's dedicated fan base. It became a powerful anecdote of his courage and his unwavering commitment to justice. For Miguel Ramirez, that day was transformative. John Lennon's intervention not only saved him from an unjust arrest, but also instilled in him a renewed sense of dignity and belonging. He went on to pursue his education, eventually becoming a community organizer, tirelessly advocating for the rights of immigrants and marginalized youth. He never forgot the rock star who stood up for him, and the message of Imagine became his guiding principle. For John, the incident reinforced his belief in the power of individual action. It showed him that even amidst his personal struggles, his voice, his presence, could make a tangible difference in the lives of ordinary people. It deepened his resolve in his ongoing battle against the Nixon administration, proving that he would not be silenced and that he would continue to fight for what was right. Officer Miller, after the incident, faced an internal review. While no formal charges were filed, the public nature of the confrontation and the involvement of John Lennon ensured that his actions were scrutinized. He was quietly reassigned to a less visible beat, a subtle but clear message from his superiors that such high-profile abuses of power would not be tolerated. The Lower East Side street, usually a place of anonymity, became a symbol of resistance. The story of John Lennon stopping a police officer to defend an innocent fan became part of its rich tapestry, a reminder that even in the face of authority, the community could stand together. The echoes of that day resonated not just in the lives of John and Miguel, but in the broader movement for civil rights and police accountability. It showed that even in the darkest times, a single act of courage and a single voice raised in defiance could inspire thousands. John Lennon, the rebel, the provocateur, had once again turned adversity into a moment of profound human connection. He had shown that true strength wasn't in fighting back with aggression, but in standing firm with dignity and letting the truth speak for itself. The scars were unseen, but the lesson was clear. Prejudice, when truly confronted, could be disarmed by courage and conviction. New York City, December 8, 1980. John Lennon was murdered. His voice silenced, but his legacy and the story of his unwavering commitment to justice continued to resonate. The incident on the Lower East Side in 1973, though a quiet moment in the grand narrative of his life, became a powerful testament to his character. It revealed a man who, despite his own flaws and struggles, possessed an unshakable commitment to equality and a profound courage in the face of oppression. Yoko Ono, in the decades that followed, became the fierce guardian of John's legacy, ensuring his music and his message continued to reach the world. She continued her own artistic journey, her work finally receiving the critical recognition it deserved, a testament to her own resilience and vision. Miguel Ramirez, the innocent fan, lived a life dedicated to social justice, forever inspired by the man who had stood up for him. He often shared the story of that day, not to glorify John Lennon, but to empower others, to remind them that their voices mattered, and that injustice should never go unchallenged. The story of the police officer who tried to arrest an innocent fan, and John Lennon's powerful response, this is not found in every official biography. It's a hidden truth, a whisper in the annals of rock and roll history, but for those who know it, it speaks volumes about the man John Lennon truly was. Not just a rock star, not just an activist, but a deeply courageous, profoundly committed human being who would not tolerate injustice, no matter the personal cost. He didn't just stop an arrest, he transformed an entire street. He didn't just defy an officer, he reaffirmed his message of peace and justice in the most powerful way possible. And in doing so, he left an unseen ripple of change that slowly, subtly began to shift perceptions, proving that sometimes the most powerful statements are delivered not with anger, but with unwavering conviction and profound love for humanity. The Lower East Side street is long gone. The echoes of that day have faded into history. But the echo of John Lennon's defiance, his quiet courage, and his profound commitment to justice still resonates. A timeless reminder that true strength lies not in tolerating oppression, but in confronting it and letting the unfinished song of freedom play on. The official police reports of that day might only mention a minor street disturbance, a footnote in history. But the true story isn't in the reports. It's in the memory of a split second, a silenced officer, a defiant stand, and the profound respect that followed as an entire street stopped. The end. If this story about courage, defiance, and the power of standing up against injustice moved you, subscribe and hit that like button. And share this with someone who needs to hear that true strength lies in upholding dignity and equality for all. What moment taught you the most about the power of confronting prejudice or abuse of power? Tell us in the comments below.